Welcome to Grace Church, a fellowship that's been serving the South Coast for over 23 years. Grace Church is more than a congregation. They're a family of believers who are ready to welcome you to a place where you can feel the tangible grace of God. Join Grace Church every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. for a time of contemporary worship and a relevant message from the Word of God. For more information, please visit gchurch.us. And now here's Pastor Ron Moore with this week's timely message.
Last week we talked about the heart of a leader. We talked about get your heart right and your motives right and everything will do well. But today I want to talk about really not the heart of a leader, but the hands of a leader. It's one thing to know to do right. It's another thing to do right. So let's talk about that. Number one, the greatest leadership myth. This is the greatest leadership myth of all times is that individuals can accomplish great things. A lot of people say, well, I'm a self-made person. And we look around sometimes and we see parents and they got just the nicest kids. And we think, man, they must have really done a good job. But I can tell you that if a parent has children that you think, oh, they're just perfect, they didn't do this on their own, they had help. Or a marriage, you think, oh, this is just amazing that people have this perfect marriage, and I wish I had that. And we think that they got that on their own. I'm telling you, they did not. They didn't. They had help. They had support. It's easy to see an athlete. There's been lots of athletes that are superstars that were on losing teams because the team wasn't either behind them or the team wasn't good. The truth of this thing is, it's not the individual's greatness that made them great. The truth is that nothing of significance has ever been achieved by an individual acting alone. Nobody, I know we've got Clint Eastwood, and he had all those movies where he was just the lone person that saved the town, but that's not the way it works. It doesn't ever work that way. It doesn't work that way in society. It doesn't work that way in families. It doesn't work that way in schools. It doesn't work that way in churches. Below the surface, listen, what seems like a solo act has always been a team effort, every time. And if you really think about it, it'd be easy to say, oh no, I know people they're just awesome. They're not accomplishing what they need to accomplish unless they're with a team. The myth is that individuals can accomplish great things, but the truth is teams accomplish great things. Which brings me to maybe one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time, John Wooden, UCLA coach. I mean, he had some people on his team. He had this guy right here, Lou Alcindor, which all you young guys don't know who that is, but that's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He had him on his team. Can you imagine what kind of a coach would say, we can do great things because we got this one guy? He also had Bill Walton. And what was the other guy's name? UCLA player. Gail Goodrich. Yeah, Gail Goodrich. Those guys. He had these people, these amazing people, but UCLA became a championship team during those years that he was the coach, not because he was the greatest coach or not because they were the greatest players, but because, number one, they worked together as a team. And by the way, I don't know if you know it, but John Wooden was an amazing Christian, great speaker. And he said, as important as basketball is to me, nothing is greater than my devotion to Christianity. Amazing thing. So this is a big idea. I'm trying to hurry here. The big idea is you can't accomplish anything without the significance of a team. You can't accomplish anything of significance without a team. You just can't do it. And in our church, we have high hopes. We have aspiration that God has got something going on here. We do. I've talked to you, and I know we do. And we think, I wonder why things aren't moving the way that we thought they would. And God gave me a word about that earlier, but it's for me. I'll give you near the end, just right before I tell you which finger to cut off, what He spoke to me. But I believe that this is primary in what we're doing. This is the big idea of the sermon. You can't accomplish anything of significance without a team. You can do a little bit on your own, but you can't do what you need to do without a group of people around you. I want you to turn to chapter 6 of Luke. In chapter 6 of Luke, Jesus is just starting his ministry. He's not well known. Nobody knows really who he is. He's done a few miracles here and there, and he's kind of walking around with this group of people, and he's teaching them. They're pretty excited about his teaching. But his goal isn't just to be a good teacher or just to, like break some bread with some people. But his goal is he wants to transform the whole world. Now, this guy who is a carpenter's son, who nobody knows, he's just starting out. His goal is that for God so loved the whole world, he gave his son. So this is a whole world thing. He's got this is a goal that I can't even imagine, that I'm going to transform the entire world or even the entire nation. Or how about God has called us to transform and bless a city. Maybe 2, maybe 3, according to where you're living. We know he's talked to us about the city of North Bend. And when I even look at 9,000 people in North Bend, I think, how in the world can we make an influence in that group of people? And we've tried often different things, and there's times when we've been more successful than not. And the times that we're more successful was the time when we had a team of people that were focused in on what we believed that God had talked to us to do. So let's read. Verse 12. About that same time, he climbed to a mountain to pray, and there all night in prayer before God. All night. Now, I've been actually preaching for well over 45 years. Almost 48 now. And I'm serious about God. And I have prayed early in the morning, and I have prayed during the day, and I have prayed lengthy prayers, and I have went on prayer walks, and I have prayed before I went to bed, and I've woken up in the middle of the night, and I've prayed, but I have yet to ever, and I thought about this, I've never prayed all night long. I would dare say that many of us have. That we have taken the entire evening, and prayed all night. Now, it wasn't like he slept all the next day. He prayed all night long, and then he went to work. And I think about, what was it that caused him to pray all night long? What was so important that he had to pray all night long? I mean, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he did not pray all night long. In fact, nowhere in the New Testament can you find that he ever again prayed all night long. So whatever was happening right now was so important that Jesus prayed all night long. Here's what he says. The next day, or early in the morning, he summoned his disciples. At that time could have been hundreds of people. We don't know, maybe even 1,000 people. All the disciples. And from them, he selected 12 he designated as apostles. There were going to be these 12 people, and out of everybody around, he said, this is going to be my team. In fact, he even got smaller than that. Peter, James, and John became his inner circle of people around him. And so there was this team that he was putting together, and it was so important he spent an entire night before God saying, who are these people that we're going to get? Number one. Sermon point number 1, there are few things, very few things are as important as the team you surround yourself with. Now, I want you to remember last week we learned, if you weren't here, you just got to take my word for it and go back and see the video, but we learned last week that every one of you are a leader. Every one of you has influence. Leadership is influence. And every one of you is a leader, and everybody has been called to be a leader. Without going over the sermon, he said, you're going to be the top dog and not the bottom. He said, you're going to be a light on a hill. He said, you're to go out and preach the gospel to every creature. So we're without a doubt, we are leaders, every one of us, and we are influencers. Here's the problem. Some of you are leaders in ways that aren't good. You lead people astray rather than toward Jesus. And some of you are influencers, but your influencers is not for good, it's for bad areas. You say, well, that's awfully rough for you to say. Well, I was talking to me. There have been times, and probably will still be, when my influence is not for good, and it's actually causing some problems. Jesus said that if you're going to be a call for him, that you will gather and you won't scatter. Okay? That's one of the reasons, by the way, that God's spoken to me about being more active in the city churches, and also in the city. And I told the Lord the other day, he said, if you want me doing something, you're going to have to help me, because I have no real influence in this city, but I'm willing to do what you want me to do. And I mean, like 3 days later, the mayor called me and said, I need to talk to you. I thought, maybe she wants me to take her job. No, it didn't work that way. It was actually just a task force, but it doesn't make any difference. Let's go for it. Myth. You have all the gifts and abilities that you will ever need to lead. That's a myth. I don't have near the gifts that I need. I was asking God the other day, I said, you're going to have to give me more gifts. You're going to have to help me in so many areas. There's so many areas I'm lacking. And I began to talk to him about it. You know, on top of my list right now seems to be my age. I think, oh, Lord, you know how old I am. Like you forgot, you know. And you're still requiring some things of me, and I don't have them. And so I wrote a list of things that I need, gifts and abilities that I need. I have to be a vision caster, a preacher, a communicator, a manager, a team builder, a recruiter, a creative writer, a counselor, a conflict arbitrator. I got to be an expert in finances, an expert in real estate, an expert in construction. I need to be an audio and a video technician, a visual graphics designer. I need to know everything there is to know about the kids of this generation, students, college, adults, special needs people, seniors. I got to know how to do funerals, weddings, how to take care of social media, marketing, crisis management, human resources. I got to be a lawyer, a web designer. I got to know about security, and go on and on. All that, I have to be an amazing husband, a great father and grandfather, a good friend, and a marathon walker. You say, well, you're none of those things. I know. And there's nobody that does this. If we're going to have an influential church, by the way, we need those things. My daughter-in-law has actually preached me under conviction about helping special needs people. We have children in our congregation that can't come because they have special needs. We've had several over that. And the church that Jason and Kara go to, they have 18 campuses around the city, and they never open a campus unless they have a staff and music staff and a ministry staff and a special needs program, because it's so important. You see, so I can't handle that. And well, neither can I. I don't even know the first thing about it. But I do know that other people can. And I know that in this audience right now, what I said I have to have, that God has given us, because many of you say, well, that would be a breeze. That would be easy. I forgot who said this. I got it written down there, but you show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Oh yeah, Craig Rochelle said that. You show me your friends, I can show you your future. You show me the people that you're hanging around with, I'll show you where you're going. And I'm looking at this group that's here today. I think, man, we need to hang around a little bit more. We need, sometimes we feel like, well, we got to get to church, we got to get home, we got to get to church, we got to get home. And there's really no time to interact, and we spend maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe come in 15 minutes for a little cup of coffee or something, interact a little bit. But really, it's the people that you hang around with is where your future is going. And if their future is not going somewhere that you want to go, and you're hanging around that, maybe you're going to begin to go where they're going rather than where you want to end up. And God's got dreams for you. God's dreams for you will be determined by the strength of the team around you, the people around you. We know this because in Jeremiah, let me read this to you in the message. It says, I know what I'm doing, and I have it all planned out. Plans to take care of you, not abandon you. Plans to give you the future you hope for. So, well, I never read that. That's because it sounds like this in NIV. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope for the future. See, he knows what he's doing, and he has it all planned out. I don't know if you ever do this, but I often ask God, do you know what you're doing? Or maybe it's more like this, do you know what I'm doing? What in the world we got going on here, God? Somehow I got to get an answer for this. And I have to come to the conclusion that God already has the answer. He's already got bigger plans than I can imagine. And therefore, I got to tell you, I told him the other day, you ever complain to God? You ought to walk every day and talk to God. If you walk and talk to God, pretty soon you'll start complaining. You'll actually tell you, if you talk enough, people who talk too much say too much. You got to be careful. You just can't keep talking, because pretty soon you're going to tell all your secrets, and that's what's wrong with pastors today. Is you know my entire life, because I can't help but tell you. God, I haven't got what it takes now. Here's my point. I was talking to somebody, a guy as old as me. I can't remember who it was now. I said, I used to work and get sore, but if I can just sleep next morning, I'd be all right. That's not happening anymore. In fact, I was at my son's house, and I put a floor in, and I was on my knees, not praying. Well, I was praying I could get off my knees, but I wasn't praying. But I was on my knees, and I was on my knees for several hours, and I got up the next morning. My knees still hurt, and I still had some more flooring to put in. I spent a couple of days like that, and I thought that's okay, because all I need is if I just not get on my knees for one day, then it'll all be okay. And I found out that it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay the next day, and I thought, well, I'm still resting, and I'm not going to get on my knees, and it wasn't okay the next day, and the third day it still was sore. And I'm thinking, oh, see, I don't know about you guys, but I've never been this old before, and I don't know how things react in my body. And all of a sudden I realize that I'm in a time and place where maybe I'm not going to recuperate as fast as I used to. Maybe. Lord, how am I going to take that? I just don't know if I have the energy to do what you're calling us to do. But in this congregation right now is the energy to do what God has called this church to do. Let's try number 2. Oh, I love this one. When choosing a team, prioritize teamwork over talent every time. Teamwork trumps, outperforms talent all day long. A lot of people say, you know what I can do? And they usually tell me all the gifts and abilities they have. But you know what's more important than your gifts and abilities is your ability to work with a team. So let's look at it. The next day, he summoned his disciples. So he gets them, he summons them, and he says, I've selected you 12. So they mention this, and I was going through the next few verses talk about the 12 and so I looked at them to see were they talented to be apostles, to be preachers, to be proclaimers, to be ministers, to be healers. Simon, whom we named Peter, he was impulsive, and he was arrogant, and he had his foot in his mouth most of the time. Andrew, his brother, hardly had anything to say, but when he did, you could tell he was envious of Peter, who was always out front. James and John, sons of Zebedee, they were impulsive, they were selfish. John thought he was special. When he wrote the book of John, he said, and the apostle that Jesus loved, when he talked about himself. Philip, he was a realist. He didn't understand the power of God. Bartholomew was a bigot. I haven't got time to show you all these. Levi, or Matthew as we know his name, he was a tax collector, and nobody liked him. Thomas was a doubter. He was Eeyore altogether. James, the less I know that The Chosen said that the less meant that he was disabled, but the actor that plays James the less is disabled. There's a little thing in there if you've ever watched that video. But James, he thought himself less because he was less. He might have been short. He might have been short on wisdom. We don't know exactly. It doesn't really talk about that much. But we do know that he had problems with his self-outlook. Jude, or Thaddeus, according to which version you got, he was a criticizer. Simon the Zealot was a trained killer. That's always a good guy to have on your team, a killer, you know. I mean, he'd been trained all his life to be a killer, and then Jesus says, I think I'll take you. And then, of course, then we got Judas, who was a traitor. And if you look at that, do you think that Jesus chose the most talented people in the world? When you look at this group of people, you think, well, why in the world would he? It wasn't like he didn't have them to look at. There was more than just those guys, because there started to be multitudes following him, and there was all kinds of people wanting to be around him. And it was very important for people to be, if they knew of a rabbi, if they could just become one of his students. It was amazing. And so it's people that were vying for those places, I'm sure. But Jesus chose these people, and I can tell you that he chose these people not because they were the most talented. Look what it says in Acts 4. It said when Peter and John prayed for the guy in the temple, it said they couldn't take their eyes off them. Peter and John standing there so confident, so sure of themselves. Their fascination deepened when they realized these two were laymen with no training. They were unschooled, ordinary men. That's the way King James says it. In scripture or formal education, they were just regular people. I mean, these guys most of them were fishermen. Nobody was really well educated except Luke. Every one of them had emotional and problems. Every one of them. It wasn't that they were schooled, that they knew what they were talking about. They even knew what they were getting into. But when Jesus prayed all night, he realized that these 12 would form a team, and this team would transform the world. Are you following me so far? All he knew is this bunch of young men would work as a team, which they did. MIT had a study not long ago. I think I may have told some of you this, but there were 700 people in this study, and they gave all the people in the study, they gave them a IQ test. So they knew they had geniuses all the way down to not geniuses. And so they formed them into about 150, not quite that, 143 or something. I'm not good with numbers, but around 150 different teams. And on some of the teams, they put just only geniuses. And other teams, they put a mixture of geniuses and non-geniuses. And in some of the groups, they put, well, just a whole lot of non-geniuses. And so they gave them all things to do. You know, they were all the same, by the way. And they said in these things to do, what we want you to do is we want you to see if you can put it together. And they found this, that the people who were geniuses mostly didn't like to work in teams because nobody was as smart as they were and nobody was as talented as they were. And so they would vie and fight over their ideas, and they never got the situation accomplished. They found that most of the time it was the people who had absolutely nobody there that thought they knew what they were doing, and they realized how dependent they would be on each other if they were going to accomplish this at all. And they joined together and worked as a team, and they found that these people most of the time, without the superstars, these people most of the time, just regular people, if they were working together and doing what they needed to do, would outperform any of the other groups. Michael Jordan put it this way: talent wins games, but teamwork wins championships. I mean, every once in a while you can come off and look really good, and you can preach that one sermon that everybody likes, or you can do that one thing that you know how to do, but until you learn who you are in the team, in the body of Christ. By the way, if you want to get spiritual, we're talking about the body of Christ. Can you actually operate through the one another's? Can you come and minister to one another, or has it got to be the superstar and the guy on top? Now, you guys know me well enough now to know that I'm no superstar. And I don't understand how we would ever do what God's called us to do. So we got to learn how to work together. Is that correct? Can I have an amen? All right. Just see if you're awake. Let me continue reading. I can't remember how I put this together. Brandon it's gone. Oh, trust me. Trust me. I'm an expert. Acts 4. Let's read it. It says, they couldn't take their eyes off them. Their fascination deepened when they realized these were two laymen with no training or in Scripture or formal education. They recognized them as a companion of Jesus. I don't have time to talk about how important it is that they were a companion of Jesus. This doesn't mean that they were just around Jesus. They had realized that they had been infiltrated, is a good word there, but it doesn't really fit in English. But of Jesus. But with the man right before them standing there so upright and so healed, what could they say against that? And so they sent them out of the room so they could work out a plan, and they talked it over. What can we do with these men? Number 3, Jesus prioritized investing and empowering his team. I'm pretty good at investing. I'm not very good at empowering. I realized that this week. Actually, 2 weeks ago when I was putting all this together. Is I'm pretty good at talking to people, investing time into them, but I'm horrible at empowering people. And so I'm trying to get better at that. I really am. And so there are some people that have become a part of my team. And I know that I can depend on them. And that they are for me and they're not against me. And we're working together for the same goals. You understand the teamwork there. And so I've begun to empower people, and I'm kind of surprised at how good they're getting when we empower them. Kyle's a good one there. I asked Kyle if he'd take over the Sunday morning, early morning prayer, because I do that. And what if I give it to somebody and they do something that's wrong? And so not only investing time into Kyle, and we meet together every 2 weeks, but investing time into them, I've begun to empower him. And as I empowered him, I began to watch how he's blossomed. I look at Bob Gorman. We meet together every 2 weeks, and we've become a team. We're part of the team. He's become a part of who I am. And as I talk to him, I realize we're going the same direction. And I've empowered him to make sure that somebody gets up Sunday morning, and he in turn empowers them to say something at the beginning of the service, and has different people take up the offering and things like that. And there's a little bit of an empowerment there. There's some of you that have been with me, Lord, for 20, 30 years, and you know exactly where we're going and what we're doing. And you know all of them. By this time, if you've been in this church like for 20 years, now then you already know all my strengths and all my weaknesses. And you realize that the weaknesses are outforming the strengths. And some of you have stood by me and taken care of the areas that I lack. And because of that, I've looked better. And because of that, you're indispensable. I mean, like Jeb, if I need to know, he's had a business for a long time and finances. I talked to him about situations, and he's been one of those guys where, maybe 15 years ago he wouldn't have told me the truth, and now he just looks me in the eye and he just cuts me to the bone. And he does it in such a way that I really appreciate it. Some of you have done that. Because, see, what happens is there's a difference between investing in people and empowering people. And some of us, even when we give things away, that all of a sudden, now this is my domain and nobody can touch it. And you're not really willing to empower. But Jesus did this very well. Matthew 10. It said the prayer was no sooner prayed than it was answered. And then Jesus, by the way, this is the companion to Luke. It says Jesus called his 12 followers and sent them out into ripe fields. And he gave them power. I love the way the message says it. He gave them power to kick out the evil spirits and tenderly care for the bruised and the hurting lives. It's the Greek word I'll just tell you. It's exousia. Exousia sometimes is translated power and sometimes translated authority. But if you really do a deep study in it, you're going to find out this. It's the authority to make decisions. That I'm going to give my life and my ministry, what I feel like that God has called me to, and I'm willing to give it to other people and give them the right to make decisions. Jesus said, I'm just going to send you out. They were not qualified for this. They were not even taught this. He just said, I'll just send you out, and you guys go out there and heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out demons, cleanse the leopard. And don't take anything with you, because you might lean on whatever you take with you. Just take the shoes that are on your feet and go. That would be a really scary thing if you think about it. But he had to get with it because he was going to only be here like 3.5 years, and he was trying to form these people into groups of people that could transform an entire world. And the most amazing thing is that these 12 men, 11, because Judas hung himself, but they threw another guy in there. These men that were apostles, not only did they drink from the same cup that Jesus drank from, and every one of them suffered tremendously, but they went out, and every place they went, they transformed the communities that they were in. Oh. By the way, when Jesus said, hey, there's 5,000 people here, well, there's 5,000 men, there's 10,000, 15,000 people here, and they need food. I know what I'll do. I will make food and I will give it to them. He did not do that. He said, do you guys have any food? He made them go out and try to find some food. They brought back a morsel or two, and he said, he blessed it, he broke it, he put it in the apostles' hands, said, now you go out and feed them. That's a pretty big empowerment. I mean, they look at the little bread, little fish they got in their hands, they must have thought, feed who? With what? But as they gave it out, the miracle happened in their hands. So let me just give you the end here real quick. Trying to see how much I haven't got. I was with God the other day and asking him about my leadership and the blessing that God didn't seem like was happening. I said, Lord, you said that you're building the church, and I don't have to worry about it. It's not built with my hands, it's built with your hands. So what about it, God? What is it? Some of you get revelation from God you never have to tell anybody, but I felt like God told me to tell you this. He said, Ron, maybe the reason you're not seeing the blessing in your life is in your leadership is because you keep everything in your hands. You got to control everything, and you're not empowering the people around you. And I said, well, thank you, Lord. Because see, the Lord told me that the right leaders were being raised up, and the right people were coming around, and that it was my responsibility not only to invest time with them, but also empower them. My job is really threefold. If you really think about it, I have 3 jobs in this church. Number 1, I'm the vision caster. That's what I am. I mean, I'm the primary vision caster. There are people who say, well, I think we ought to do is do this, and that's true. But basically, God has called me as this point person. My job is to kind of cast vision and say, this is the areas I think we're going into. The second one is I'm a communicator. I preach and I teach. And I'm not the only one. And I bring in few, and that's very few. Like Randy Rutledge came in the other day in February. Jerry Elder's coming back, not in February, October. Jerry Elder's coming back down for a week. And we have certain people come in, very, very seldom. But we have a lot of good people here in the church. And so this summer I've tried to do at least one a month. And I'm liking that and enjoying the ministry of that. But primarily my job is to teach and preach. But here's the one. The third one, and maybe the most important one that I've got to really spend some time on is I'm supposed to guard the culture of our church. Who we are as a church. There's a slogan. I think it's the next slide there, Brandon. If you want things done right, you have to do it. What's the word there? Yourself. You got to do it yourself, right? That's what you got to do. If you want it done, do it yourself. Well, that's not the way Jesus did it. Jesus very seldom, he wasn't interested in doing it himself. He was trying to get other people to do it. He said things like when they couldn't do it, he said, well, how long do I have to be with you? Didn't you just see what I did? Where's your faith? Why do you doubt? All those things that we know that happen. The myth is if you want things done, you have to do it yourself. Harry Truman said this, it's amazing what you accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. That's big. Let me just read these last two. You can't accomplish anything of significance without a team. This is what John Maxwell said. One is too small a number to ever achieve anything of greatness. Now, these people are people who have achieved something, have achieved a certain amount of notoriety, every one of them. And what they're saying is that it may look like, from the surface, may look like it's all about them, but it's not all about them. It's all about the team. So let me ask you, which finger do you cut off? Which finger? Those fingers. Did anybody choose the first finger? Have that one? How many? When we talk about leadership, what do we usually do? Which finger? I'm number one. I'm the one. Okay. It's not that. Everybody chooses the pinky. How many chose the pinky? Okay. That's the one I would have done till I read the hand surgeon's thoughts. Your pinky is 50% of your grip. If you don't believe that, go home, get a jar, and grab hold of the jar, and you realize that when you grab that jar, most of what you've got is on that little finger. 50% of your grip is in your pinky. 50%. You don't want to cut off your ring finger or your middle finger, because how else would you talk to people in the car? No, you can't cut off your middle finger or your ring finger because they're connected to one tendon in your hand, and that tendon operates basically both of them in unison, and they are 35% of your grip. So if you're talking about grip, everything, you've got 85% in just those last three fingers. You could actually do almost anything like opening a jar with just those three fingers. In fact, if you put your other finger on it, you're not really receiving hardly any additional strength at all. And everything that your forefinger, your pointer finger can do, your middle finger can do. I was watching a movie the other day, and there was a gangster, and this one young man, he messed up, and they said, well, we're going to cut one of your fingers off. Which finger do you want cut off? I don't know who comes up with this. Who would ever ask somebody, we're going to cut your finger off, and it'd be nice to say, which one do you want? And he said to the boy, he said, I would suggest you don't have me chop off your trigger finger. Your trigger finger. But ballistics experts tell us that you can shoot a gun just as accurate with your middle finger. When it really comes down to it, this finger is the one that if you had to have one amputated, you would amputate this finger. It's only like 15% of your grip, and almost any other finger can do what this finger does. Are you still following me? There is one finger we haven't talked about, and that's the thumb. And the thumb is an amazing digit, because the thumb, if you don't have a thumb, you actually don't have a hand. So if you cut off your thumb, in fact, in days gone by, they would conquer a king or a gladiator, and they cut off his thumbs, cut off his big toes. That's what they'd do. Because if you don't have thumbs, you can't hold on to anything. You have no grip. You really don't have a hand. You just have fingers. And so today, if you for some reason maybe were in an accident and they cut your thumb off, they will either, a lot of times they take your finger, your pointer finger, break it somehow and turn that finger into a thumb, because your thumb is what contacts every other finger and makes it a hand. Your thumb can actually touch the rest of your fingers. And there's a lot of things that that your thumb and the other fingers that it touches, that brings in what you have as a grip. Therefore, what we're talking about when we talk about teamwork, or we're talking about a church, or we're talking about working with one another, is that the most important thing is that you're able to touch with somebody, because a thumb by itself isn't going to get you any good except hitchhiking and telling somebody it's all okay. Let's go back. So the big idea, the main idea, the one that we want to get across today is just this. You can't accomplish anything without a team.
We hope you've enjoyed this message from Grace Church. Make sure to stay connected throughout the week online at gchurch.us and on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week.